Welcome back to CI Living. We are digging into gardening today.
You bet. U of I Extension Educator Sandy Mason answering your good question about gardening. And our first question, Sandy, comes from Jennifer Flesher via Facebook. She asks, does hanging CDs and socks with dog hair in them really help keep the deer away? We're having a hard time with deer topping off our tomatoes and beans.
That's kind of a million-dollar question. I think I'd be rich if I had the exact answer for this. So you can do that. I mean, it's frightening devices. CDs, you know, they kind of move, frightening devices. The whole idea of dog
catching
hair,
the light, I imagine.
Catching the light. And I've heard this for rabbits and any number of things. But the trouble is, I think more and more wildlife has just gotten used to being around people. So depending on, you know, where you are, you can try it. I wouldn't say it's probably the #1 thing that I would look at. They might also look at stuff like repellents, because there certainly are some pretty good repellents out there. There's like deer scran, deer away, liquid fence. You really have to, the one thing with those is they're not all labeled for edible plants, so you really have to read the label again, make sure it's for edible plants. The other thing is just protecting them by some kind of wiring or something. Unfortunately, that's the #1 way, is just physical protection against them. So it's tough.
I have a follow-up to that, though, that I heard that human marking can also help. And I'm not even joking about it, but okay. So have you heard of this?
I have heard of this.
Okay, but there's no evidence.
That's all she's gonna say about that.
Okay.
So next
she's gonna answer my question.
I don't want anybody calling me and saying that I recommended that. It was
right. No, that was totally ad lib right there.
It was.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay. Pat Milchuk via Facebook asks, how do you take an offshoot from the main plant of an orchid without damaging either?
Yeah, I think this actually is a great question. And the problem is that there's a bunch of different orchids. There's hundreds of different species of orchids out there. So I think really probably the best thing, since we don't know exactly what orchid they're talking about, probably the best thing is that no matter where they are, there's probably an orchid society nearby. And they're really like here in their Central Illinois Orchid Society. They meet like the third Monday at the Champaign Library. And they're a wealth of information. And more than likely, a lot of these groups will actually help people sort of figure out how to do it, or they have workshops or whatever. So I think probably the best thing is just, it can be done, but it really depends on the orchid. So probably check with their local orchid society and get hooked in with them, because if you're really into orchids, I think it's a great way to go.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense, and you go where the knowledge is, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we have a question now from Lisa Tabor via Facebook. She says, I planted tomato plants and didn't get a single bloom, but they're about 4 feet tall now. What gives? I've never had problems until the last 2 summers. Well, Sandy, fix this.
Fix this. I know. What gives, Sandy? You know, last year was kind of a wash because of the drought, so we don't really care. But probably, usually it's a couple things. Often it can be, if you're not really getting a lot of tomatoes, it could be a couple things. If we get hot, dry winds, what can sometimes happen is actually the flowers will fall off. If we have a lot of really high temperatures, a lot of wind, sometimes the flowers will fall off, and all you have is a lot of foliage. And then once the weather, like it changes now, then they start to produce again, or will start to produce. So that could be it. The other thing is, because they're so big, I wonder if they're not fertilizing too much. Because too much nitrogen, you get lots and lots and lots of leaves and not a lot of fruit. So really hold back on the nitrogen, in particular fertilizer. So that first number on the label or whatever you're using, you may have a little bit too much nitrogen in there. So I wouldn't give up yet. There's still plenty of time. There's still plenty of time. They could get some. So yeah, it's really one of those, you really want to watch the nitrogen on what you're putting on, because it really promotes leaf growth, nitrogen does, and not a lot of flowers, which is really what we're looking for with tomatoes.
Is there a point where you would give up hope? I mean, if you don't see it by Labor Day?
I don't know. Right. No, probably late. You know, we're really getting into that point. But even, you know, so much of it depends on how late we have a frost. You know, sometimes we have a really, like last year, it was pretty late by the time we had a frost. So you can hope that we have a late frost, and then you'll still get. So I certainly wouldn't give up hope just yet, because now that it's cooler, they're actually not, you know, growing quite as much. So it's kind of that it's too hot, now it's a little cool.
Okay, we've only got a few seconds left, but let's try to get one more question in from Sandra Elgin Cox via Facebook. And she says, my honeysuckle looks dead but started growing on the ends. Should it be cut back?
I would not cut it back now. So the fact that it probably had some leaf disease problems, they get powdery mildew and a few other things, so the leaves look bad. I would actually wait until probably next spring or something, actually do the major cutback, because you really don't want to cut things back when they're going through the stress of high temperatures or low watering or those kind of things. You may want to, I would water it now is really what I would do. If you're not getting any rain, I'd water it.
Smart. Always good stuff from Sandy Mason. Thank you. We appreciate it.
It's always fun.
All right, coming up next, we're making plans for our last blast of summer with the Urbana Park District.
Yes, while you still have some time to enjoy an afternoon out on the lake, a concert under the Central Illinois sky, who knows? Still lots of time to explore. We'll be right back.